All right, so yesterday I did a bit of recording where I took my previous perception of fundamentals and tried to fix on / expand upon it. I didn't have a whole lot of time, so I was going to try and do it really quick, but I ended up getting cut off partway through. And since then, I've made a lot of adjustments to the microphone filters in OBS for recording. So rather than trying to just finish things up and having the recording stuff sound way different later, I decided to just re-record and summarize some of the things that I decided on. So previously I had fundamentals as kind of just a more nebulous term. I was kind of trying to use intuitively without really defining what it is. And so I decided that for my purposes, what I'm going to call the fundamentals are basic gameplay elements that are universally applicable to all games. And obviously the all games thing is kind of an asterisk for kind of, with qualifiers, right? Some games are short enough that not everything applies. Sometimes characters just play differently, but overall, just things that kind of apply to every game that are core to playing the game. This includes, but is not limited to, some of the underlying game mechanics. And so another thing I decided to do is clarify the distinction I have between routing and looting. Or really, it's a combination of clarifying what I'm going to use them to mean, and also just kind of redefining them so that they're less ambiguous. And so routing, I'm calling any kind of out-of-game planning for both the build that your character is going to go for, what food they're going to build along the way, and maybe like which zones you're going to go to, stuff like that. So any of the out-of-game planning stuff that goes into figuring out the general plan for building both equipment, food, and possibly later on traps. And this would also include any kind of contingency plans, like if zone X closes before I get there, I'm going to go here. Or, if I can only find, 2 scrap and 1 piano wire, and it's starting to get, to 40 seconds in hotel, I'm just going to go to second zone. Stuff like that. Anything that's just out of game planning stuff. And then looting, I'm calling the in-game execution of routes, and then adaptation for unforeseen circumstances. So in the case of the 2 scrap, 1 piano wire case, that's something that was planned out during routing, and so that would be kind of execution at that point. But there's another game from one of the previous blocks that I think I might try and do a voiceover of at some point soon, where I see that there's 5 people starting in hotel, and I decide there that if I can't, or that if I go to hotel second, I'm probably not going to find anything. And so it would be much better to just go to hotel first, grab as much as I can, and then go back, Avenue, sorry. There was 5 people starting at Avenue, so I decided to go there and then just go to hotel second, just grab as much as I can, teleport immediately, basically, and then adapt from there. And so, in this case, the decision to start Avenue and then the decisions later on made to adapt the routing afterwards, I would call part of looting. Then there's crafting, which is just making stuff, basically knowing what stuff is made out of. Vision, which just has to do with seeing people a lot. So previously, like getting vision and minimap awareness would have fallen under here. But I think vision, encompasses both of these things, right? Being able to see things is a fundamental part of the game. Getting yourself so you can see more things is also a fundamental part of playing the game. Then we have hunting, which is more or less just things that you can kill on timers. And so, obviously there's the regular spawns. There's also wickling, just knowing when that's going to spawn, being in the right place to contest and things like that. Threat assessment, which is something added here. I don't think I really need to It's something that I added as a result of me playing the game and kind of realizing that this is a really core part of it. It's basically just quickly figuring out whether or not you think you can take a fight, basically, or like figuring out how strong someone else is. Combat stuff was just in combat doing things, just the actual fighting part of the game. And then escaping was something I was considering. There was a little bit of time where I was considering putting ratting as a fundamental, but I think that's more of a play style rather than a fundamental. Like, you can try to escape from people without the intent to rat out the entire game, right? Like, maybe you take a fight and you miss all your skill shots and you just need to get out for a bit. That wouldn't be you deciding and committing to ratting at that point. Maybe you decide, okay, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna wait for my cooldowns. Maybe you didn't actually blow your ult, but you kind of blew everything else. You're gonna like escape for a bit and then re-engage once you tick enough food and get your cooldowns back and stuff like that. Yeah, and so then the other part I had was gameplay skills, which is basically just things relating to the fundamentals that are more specific and just kind of skills you can develop related to that fundamental to enhance gameplay and make you like more likely to win and things like that. And so this is kind of just getting into the details a bit with the fundamentals. And so for routing, there's a lot that goes into routing. You got to plan food, you got to plan the zones, you got to plan which equipment you're going to do. People that aren't me probably do some amount of planning, like, okay, I'm going to make X amount of traps at some point. I just haven't bothered the traps because it's an extra complication I don't need right now when I'm trying to learn other stuff. Contingency planning. So like plans if you don't get the ideal routing or ideal situations. Again, the example I've had with hotel, or my build calls for like 3 scrap, a watch, and 2 piano wire. But if it's going to cost me a lot of time and I have 2 scrap and at least 1 piano wire, I can go ahead and move to the next zone. Like that's a contingency plan, I would say. And then something that I was thinking would be good to explore a bit more is non-RNG pivot items. This is because in my more recent games with my current build, I've been needing to glue in alley, and a lot of the games I can find at most 1. There was one game where I spent, I think, at least 2 minutes in alley looking for a second glue, only to look through literally every single box and not find a second one. And so that was making me think that it would be good to be able to pivot to something if I can't find like a really contested item. And it could be that, routing or equipment planning changes in that would be better. This is just, I think this could be a skill involved in routing. You could definitely get some amount of value out of it. And yeah, determining core/minimal items and breakpoints for looting. So this is just, recognizing in a build what items are most important for your character to function, and then figuring out like what you actually need. And this, I guess there's some overlap here with contingency planning. So maybe there's something I should do. I'm just gonna put them next to each other for now then. Just because they seem very related. But yeah, the example of the 2 scrap, 1 piano wire from hotel for the 4-zone build I'm running right now. And so then we have looting. One skill is obviously going to be in-zone pathing. There's a big difference between let's just go to a map real quick. There's a big difference between saying, okay, I'm going to loot a box here and loot a box here and loot a box here, and just going ping-ponging back and forth, and just taking a more efficient path, like maybe just kind of going up here, then going down here and like into temple or something like that, right? Like there can be a lot of variation in how you path within a zone to try to loot things. Execution of the route plan, so just all the planning that went in on whatever you were planning, just the actual execution on that. A big thing is just not forgetting your breakpoints for stuff. Not forgetting like what items are most important, you know, things like that. Not forgetting any kind of backup plans you have. Just the ability to grab stuff from boxes quickly is important. Inventory management, I think is kind of what falls under here, because you know, the main time I need to worry about managing my inventory is when I'm really focused on looting and I'm accumulating a lot of items in the early game. And thus, you know, my inventory space is much more contested than it will be later in the game, when I've already finished all my equipment and I've already made a lot of food and there's really not a whole lot else that I need. Knowing where components are. So this is part of the adaptation part of looting. Like I said, you know, if zones close, maybe you get pushed out of a zone because someone else has already got 3 kills and finished their build, and you know, whatever else is going on, and you need to go to some other zone because if you don't, you're gonna die, or just the zone you were planning on going to got closed while you were fighting some other people. Being able to adapt quickly is important, and I know that in this game you can click on the component to see where it is on the map, but being able to think things through, and especially if you need multiple components, and you know, there's 2 zones that each have one of those components, but one zone that has 2, just like knowing immediately where that zone is, you can get some value from. And then just, you know, the ability to like completely reroute on the fly, you know, is definitely influenced by this other skill here. You know, it's just that type of stuff. Basically, you know, execution of the original plan and in-game adaptation for situations that you haven't planned for, basically, what I'm calling looting. Crafting, I really couldn't think of a whole lot of skills for this other than knowing which components are needed for which items, and then like recognizing when you can complete an item, basically, or like what the next thing you need is, and like once you get that, you can complete the item. This is definitely more of a knowledge thing. Then we have vision, which I put some stuff here together. So ping / minimap awareness, console vision awareness. This specifically was me thinking that it would be useful to know the areas that console shows, so that but both you can know, okay, if I get console, I'm going to get these areas. But also just for other purposes as well, like if you're trying to sneak up on someone or other things like that. And then ward placement. I put in combat ward placement down here because I think it's kind of a different skill. I think ward placement has more to do with knowing spots where you can get a lot of value out of placing the ward, and this would largely be just, okay, if I place this here and then I grab console, I can see like the entire, you know, west side of things, and so people can't come at me from there. I think it would be stuff like that, but it's not something I focused on, so my perception of this fundamental will probably change over time. And for hunting, you know, there's a lot of knowledge stuff, just like knowing where you can find specific animals, because not every animal is in every zone. Knowing initial spawn timers, knowing respawn timers, actually tracking respawn timers. Yeah, so keeping track of that like in game. Actually killing the, you know, beasts. Although that's gonna have a lot to do with being at the right place at the right time, which is going to be influenced by, you know, tracking respawn timers. Yeah, then there's just dodging animal skill shots, so just like the bear stun and the boar charge. And then I'm pretty sure that if you do things correctly, you can aggro just one wolf at a time if you really want to. And so that's a skill that could be developed. And the next thing is threat assessment. And so there's the quick check, which I'm calling just hitting the information overlay key. The one that they added to the game that just shows the grade of their weapon and their mastery level. Tab check, which is, you know, pressing tab to see what their actual items are and things like that. Actually, this also can also be mostly done by clicking them. Let's see, survivor specific knowledge about their power spike points. So like if you know that, you know, a character needs like full build before they really are very scary, and they have 3 items, you know that they're much less scary than they could be, versus other characters that maybe just start killing the lobby once they hit 1 item if you let them. Then there's matchup specific knowledge. So, you know, certain characters are better into other characters and things like that. And then like determining when you need to fight and run, which is kind of the culmination of all this other stuff, and like the core skill here. Then there's combat. I was having some trouble coming up with good names for things. I think skill shot accuracy is pretty straightforward. Tethering, which is basically staying out of the threatened range of other characters while preferably being able to hit them yourself. This term comes from Coach Curtis, mostly talking about like playing mages and stuff into, you know, other people, and just making sure that you're always just outside of their ability to hit you, until you want to like go in and hit them or do whatever else. This is basically to avoid taking free damage. Then there's in combat vision. So I'm calling that like the skill involved with, you know, recognizing dagger skill or other invisibilities being used and then throwing down a ward, or just doing that proactively. In combat tracking, so sometimes people try to run away, and being able to track them and make sure that they can't escape can be pretty important. Character specific comboing correctly. Some characters are more combo based than others. Like I think Sylvia has some specific combos that tend to make her much more effective than just throwing skills out randomly. And then I'm gonna put in combat food usage. You know, just making sure you actually use food, not overusing food, using food at a good time, things like that. And then in combat adaptations is my catch-all for sort of just like outplaying people, more generally adapting to the situation. I'm not really sure what to put here. It's just kind of the rest of combat for like how you play things out. Yeah, and then escaping, I was having some trouble coming up with specific skills. Kind of being sneaky is good, right? Like if you get away and, you know, you go over a wall and there's like 3 places you could have gone, and you do something to make sure that they can't know which way you went, like that's kind of sneakier. Knowing which walls you can get over, if any, and their locations. You know, some characters can go over walls, others can't. Either way, it's usually useful if you can put a wall between you and your opponent. It at least makes things harder. While landing slow, stun, CC, or whatever, I guess I'll put while running / unique distance. Definitely a lot of overlap with just general skill shot accuracy, but you know, slowing other people down and stopping them is part of escaping. And then some form of keeping track of where the person that's tracking or trying to hunt you is, so that you can make better decisions about getting away. And that's about it. I don't think there's anything else right now. You know, we can see that a lot of this stuff kind of got collapsed into other things, like, you know, trap crafting at some point, or to some extent pivot items, you know, awareness, and you know, there's a lot more specific skills here as well. I think the other thing this will help with, and one of my other reasons for doing this, is that it should make learning objectives much clearer in some cases. So for example, something I've been focusing on a lot is, you know, routing and looting, or at least, you know, I've been doing this with like build planning stuff, but for looting specifically, I've been focusing more on like end zone pathing, and, you know, determining minimal items and breakpoints for looting. That seems to be helping. And so basically just, I think this will be useful for setting learning objectives in the future and just organizing my thoughts a bit. So if you found that interesting and you stuck all the way through, thank you very much. And I hope to see you again.